Luke. Then Jesus said to the disciples, "There was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was squandering his property. So he summoned him and said to him, 'What is this that I hear about you? Give me an accounting of your management, because you cannot be my manager any longer.' Then the manager said to himself, 'What will I do now that my master is taking the position away from me? I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do so that when I'm dismissed as manager, people may welcome into their homes.' So, summoning his master's debtors one by one, he asked the first, 'How much do you owe my master?' He answered, 100 jugs of olive oil.' He said to him, 'Take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 50. Then he asked another, 'And how much do you owe?' He replied, 100 containers of wheat.' He said to him, 'Take your bill, and make it 80. And his master commended the dishonest manager because he has acted shrewdly. For the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into their eternal homes. Whoever is faithful in a little is faithful also in much, and whoever is dishonest in a very little is dishonest also in much. If then you have not been faithful with the dishonest wealth, who will entrust you to the true riches? And if you have not been faithful with what belongs to another, who will give you what is your own? No slave can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth." The Gospel of the Lord. Money, 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 money. Credit cards, debit cards, credit history. Credit history is more important in US than our own history. Everyone asks, is your credit history good? Until I came to the United States, I was with an ambition that I will never get a credit card because it is a form of taking a debt. But now, my close friends know how many credit cards I ended up with. In this credit-based economic system, credits and debts have become part of our lives. Especially as students, it is undeniable that many struggle with student loan debts, which leaves us with several thousands of debts, with raising education costs, rent, family care, child care. The passage for today deals with debts, money, debtors, a master, with a finance talk. In our gospel reading today, we heard a parable that puzzles us sometimes. A rich man had a manager who would oversee all the domestic and financial affairs. The rich master received some charges against him that he was squandering his wealth. The word for squandering appears also in the chapter that precedes this parable, in the parable of the lost son who squandered the property. The meaning of this word has a reference also to scatter the seed or scatter the people, as in Mary's Magnificat in chapter 1, verse 51. Or as wasting the property in lavish living, as in chapter 15, verse 13. The son is said to be squandering the property in reckless living in the parable of the lost son. The steward is accused to be squandering. even though there is no mention of exactly what he did. The master calls the steward to tell him, "Submit your accounting. You are going to be fired." He thinks about what are the options that are available for him after he gets fired. He speaks to himself, "Can I be a farmer and dig? For a long time I have been comfortable sitting on the table and working. Now I can't do physical labor. Can I beg? No, I'm ashamed. I'm so proud to do that." He comes up with this third option, which he thought is better for him. He thought that this option would be to depend on the people with whom he was interacting throughout his job. He writes out his master's debtors. "Hey, how much do you owe? 100 jugs of olive oil." Write it as 50. Another says 100 containers of wheat. Write it as 80. He believed that when he did this to the debtors, there is an unwritten deal that they would be obliged to welcome him when he has no job. When the master knows about this, to our surprise, he commends the steward for acting shrewdly. Wow! What does this parable communicate? In other words, what is Jesus trying to communicate to his disciples and the Pharisees who are listening, and to us today through this parable? There are three explicit characters in the story: the rich master, the steward, and the debtors. The debtors who have got loans here are not small farmers. Tenant farming was a widely implemented system of estate management by landowners and was indeed the preferred method during the early empire. Cultivating a farm in antiquity was a costly but risky undertaking. Of course, there are examples of tenants making large profits from their agricultural yields, similar to the parable of the rich man in Luke chapter 12, who says to himself, "I will pull down my barns and build larger ones. There I will store all my grain and my goods." But the vast majority of small farmers barely managed to meet subsistence. If rent was high or the harvest is poor, a tenant could be left without adequate funds to pay rent or even to sow one's field for the coming year. The acquisition of debt by both small and large-scale tenant farmers was therefore a common factor, and the consequences of non-payment were often quite severe. Some of these factors would lead the tenant farmers to a situation of being bought even as slaves. In Amos chapter 8, the prophet warns that God will never forget the deeds of the ones who trample on the needy, because the ones who profited from the expense of the poor are now able to buy them as slaves at low prices, as a pair of sandals. The poor are in a situation where they are not able to pay back even a small debt. The business class waits for the new moon and Sabbath to be over so that they can make more profit with their small efforts, increase shekels, and through deceitful balances, crushing them and buying them as slaves. Back to our debtors in our parable. The big amounts of loan they are in debt shows that they are not small peasant farmers. The master, of course, is a rich landlord. The steward is between this master and debtors. All three of them are in a hierarchy, but they are not at the bottom level of the society. This steward is in between these two classes, but who are all still at the upper and upper middle class of the society. There are different interpretations on why the steward reduced the debts. Some interpret that it may be a part of rent remission, which would encourage the debtors to pay back the remaining money, which would have been a reason for the master to commend him. Or he reduced the commission rate from his own profit. Or he reduced the interest that was charged unjustly. Whatever the reason, the steward was finally commended by the master for acting shrewdly. The steward, who was portrayed negatively in the beginning, has now come to a positive light in the eyes of the rich master. The Greek term phronimos and the relative term phronesis are usually translated as prudence, understanding, or wisdom. It refers to the practical wisdom of recognizing a situation and then taking an approach of action. which is a thoughtful planning. Jesus precisely uses this term in connection with being a good steward in Luke chapter 12, verse 42, where he's teaching on the need to be alert and ready for the unexpected return. It is a term he uses for the wise maidens in Matthew chapter 25, verse 2, who keep their lamps full of oil, waiting for the bridegroom to come. The steward thought that by reducing the debt, he would be welcomed in their homes, but it is a short-time, unsustainable plan. Jesus gives a contrasting idea that when you make friends for yourselves, even out of the dishonest wealth, they may welcome you into their eternal tents. The oikonomos, who is a steward, made a plan to sustain his living temporarily to be received into their oikos, the house. But Jesus asked them to make friends to be accepted into eternal skene, tents. Skene refers to the well-known movable temple of God after the pattern in which the temple at Jerusalem was subsequently built. It also refers to the eschatological reign of God. Instead of talking about money, whether it is good or bad, whether we need it or not, it most matters about what we do with that money. The system of mammon, the word used for wealth in this parable is mammon. This system of mammon squeezed the people off their land and property through heavy interest, pushing the poor and needy to ruins. We have examples of dishonest wealth in our own cultures. Many countries are facing poverty and inequality in finance and opportunities. In India, just 9 billionaires have the money which totals the money that 50% of the Indian population has. In many of our countries, why is there a deep divide between the rich and the poor? Are we lacking resources in our country? No, we are rich in resources, even though we have plenty. The greed for money and mismanagement have pushed a majority of the population into poverty. The economic crisis in Sri Lanka has led to a terrible lack of food and unavailability of essential things because of the poor management of leaders. In India, poor farmers are committing suicide due to debt, while the rich take millions of amounts as loan and from banks and flee to foreign countries. While the mammon system would appreciate the shrewdness of this dishonest manager, Jesus makes a reversal of dominant social values, which is shown throughout the Gospel of Luke. He calls the disciples to be shrewd in building friendships and relationships for the kingdom of God, which is more sustainable and eternal. In verse 9, Jesus tells, "But I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into their eternal homes." When a relationship is honest, they will stand with you even when you have no money or wealth. Wealth would be gone, but the community that is built on true friendship and relationship will sustain forever. This relationship is not something that would exploit another for one's own gains, but a relationship that would strengthen, embrace, and build one another. The friendship that Jesus suggests would continue beyond wealth and is not based on wealth. We are called to this attitude with freedom from possessions, and God invites us to a radical generosity. In this kingdom community of Jesus Christ, all the outsiders encounter Jesus, creating a true relationship built on love. As we live in a mammonic system of exploitation that serves wealth, that serves the wealthy, rich, and upper class, a system that works based on the benefits, a system that prioritizes wealth over people, sometimes we tend to value materials than the people who are behind those materials. We do not have to be faithful to the material wealth, the wealthy or powerful, to safeguard our own benefits, but we are called to be faithful even in what belongs to another, in what rightfully belongs to another, the poor, the needy, and the vulnerable ones. We cannot serve two masters. Let us serve God and build this oikumene of love, friendship, and justice. Amen.